Hello, I'm Carl Shusterman. I'm an immigration attorney. I formerly worked for the Immigration Service from 1976 to 1982, and since 1982 I've been in private practice. Today we're going to talk about another form of relief from deportation called asylum. Asylum can be based on a well-founded fear of one of these 5 subjects, either race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. A social group has to be something that is an unchangeable characteristic about you. So if you dye your hair and you think you're going to be persecuted, just dye it back again. But if it's something like your gender or your sexual orientation, that's something that cannot be changed, and you can claim persecution based on that. What percentage do you have to prove that you might be persecuted if you went back to your country? The Supreme Court says 10%. That's for asylum. There's some related forms of relief. One of them is called withholding of removal, which requires a more likely than not standard, which is 51% or more. And there's also the Convention Against Torture, if you think you might be tortured in your country. But for purposes of this video, we're only going to concentrate on asylum. Who must be the person that you claim is going to persecute you? It either has to be the government of your own country, or it has to be a group within the country that the government either cannot or will not control. So let's say there is a guerrilla group or a group of drug smugglers or something, and the government is unable to control them and they're going to persecute you. You can claim asylum because of that persecution. Now, what happens if on your way to the United States you pass through other countries? Does that disqualify you from applying for asylum once you get here because you could have applied for asylum in that other country? And the answer is not necessarily. Only if that other country offers you citizenship or permanent residence can the government claim that you were firmly resettled in that country and therefore are ineligible to apply for asylum in the United States. Now, generally, you have to apply for asylum during your first year in the United States, but there are so many exceptions to that requirement that it really eats up the rule, and you should definitely talk about that with an attorney if you're over the 1 year to make sure that you still qualify. Now, what I want to mainly concentrate in this video is how do you prove to an immigration judge that you are entitled to asylum? Number 1, you should assemble your evidence very carefully. I come across a lot of people that they fill out the asylum form, they submit it, or they have one of these notarios submit it, and then they lose their case and they can't understand why. In order to get asylum in the country, at a minimum, you should get the State Department report on your country that tells conditions. If you're this religion in a country that's some other religion, or this political party in a country that's controlled by another political party, and that states that people like you would be persecuted in the State Department reports, you're in pretty good shape. And you can get these reports without paying. You can go onto our website, onto www.shusterman.com, and just simply download them and print them and include them with your asylum application. But don't be content with just putting the State Department report. You can get reports from private organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and there may be individual organizations that concentrate on your country or your part of the world. Also, you should put in a very detailed affidavit explaining what your case is, because you may not have any physical evidence to prove that. I mean, if the police or the army is after you in your own country, you can't very well go and ask them to write a letter saying, we're going to persecute Joe if he comes back. So a lot of it's going to depend on you. If you've actually been harmed or tortured, you've had scars, you should go to a doctor so the doctor can say this person has scars not inconsistent with being tortured. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, and you should sit down and discuss this with your attorney so that you don't leave anything out. Now, of course, if you've been persecuted before, if you have what we call past persecution in your country, under the law that raises a rebuttable presumption that if you go back to your country, you're going to be persecuted again. And the only way that the government can easily overcome that is if they can show that conditions in your country have substantially changed in a way that would prevent you from being persecuted. So let's say you're from a communist country and you come to the United States and you apply for asylum, and then your country is no longer communist. Well, you may have lost your grounds for claiming persecution from that country. Another rule, which seems very easy, but it's very important, just tell the truth on your application and when you're up on the witness stand. If you do not tell the truth, the judge can, number one, deny your application because he finds that you are not credible, you're not telling the truth. Number two, if he finds that your application is frivolous, it's sort of a made-up story, you become not only ineligible for asylum, but you also become ineligible for any type of way to get a green card, any immigration benefits at all. So if you end up losing your asylum but later marry a citizen, well, your husband or wife is not going to be able to get you a green card because you had a frivolous asylum application. I'm a big believer in using expert witnesses, and I'll tell you very briefly a story of one of our recent cases where we used an expert witness and it was a great benefit to the client. I had a case in another city, not Los Angeles, and the judge told me that she had never granted a case of somebody with that particular political opinion and that particular nationality and that particular religion from that country. A few days before the hearing, we searched all over. It's sometimes very hard to find expert witnesses. I found a university professor who was an expert on conditions in that country. In this case, it happened to be Chinese Christians in Indonesia. And while I was questioning that particular witness, I said, let's go to the case on Christmas Eve a few years ago when there were church burnings all around that country. And he said, I'm sorry, Mr. Shusterman, there were no church burnings. And I was stunned. I thought, uh-oh, I read this wrong. I prepared for 100 hours for this case. He said, there were church bombings. And then the judge got into, the judges are allowed to ask questions. She said, what's the distinctions? Why are you saying bombings instead of burnings? And he said, because the churches are all made of concrete in Indonesia, and the human rights organizations found this particular type of powder that was used to set off the bombs, and the powder is only possessed not by any organization that the government cannot control, but by the police and the army in that country. And that won this fellow's case. So I highly recommend that you try to find an expert witness. If your asylum application is granted, you and your family will be able to apply for a green card within 1 year. I want you to remember one thing. Treat your case as if your life depends on it, because it does.